Okay, but I'll make it a little short. First of all, by thanking you for hosting it in the Schusterman Center. I also want to thank the contributors for their hard work and patience in putting this book together. And I want to open with a mention of the previous volume of articles, chapters, that was published in 2011 by Texas and dedicated to Israeli cinema more directly, whereas this volume tries to do something different and look at um, some of the developments that happened afterwards. And I will let Eran continue because he had some really interesting things to say and was just going to say them when we were interrupted.
Okay, so we are dealing with new media. So here are some of the challenges, but we will relaunch. So, as Yaron said, this collection, in many ways, is a follow-up to a collection that the University of Texas published about 15 years ago. And the focus of that collection was Israeli cinema, and really the height of Israeli cinema on the international scene, starting in the 1990s and into the new century. And the idea behind this volume was to explore what happened since then and how has Israeli visual media changed over the years. And the first realization was that we can no longer just focus on cinema, because in many ways, cinema has been eclipsed by other media, especially television, as the predominant representation of Israeli visual media, and also what is happening on the web as new forms of content are being made. So this is one of the fundamental changes that has happened over the past 15 years and is really reflected in the structure of this book. But other things have happened as well, and I think that this collection really captures those changes in real time. And one of the important changes is the way we generally think about Israeli visual culture. So the paradigm that dominated the discussion since the rise of Israeli film studies in the 1980s and going forward is that to examine Israeli cinema as part of a national project, as part of a national culture. And this was very true when we think of cinema as a limited kind of endeavor that is very much controlled, funded by public funds, and really represents in many ways the national narrative and the vicissitudes of the Israeli story. But when we look at what is happening in recent years in Israeli media, this is no longer the case, and the diversity of means by which it is produced and consumed no longer falls easily into one kind of collective narrative. And I think that this diversity very much plays out in this collection of essays and is a testament to the greater variety that is unfolding before our very eyes. So this is one very important change. The other change is that we have to be much more mindful to the ways by which we consume and produce visual media nowadays. We can no longer just concentrate on the thematic elements or the visual elements that are on the screen, but we have to explore to a greater degree kind of the material conditions that are behind the production and consumption of media. And I think that this also plays out in this uh, collection. Uh, Again, if we think of cinema and the type of budgets and the type of time commitment and physical commitment that each uh, movie requires, as opposed to production on the web, which is completely different and can reach audiences in great immediacy with a whole different kind of infrastructure behind it. All those changes also reflect the thematic and other elements that are produced in those different media. And I do believe that the various articles that look at the different productions in Israel, be they movies, television, or digital media, is really reflected in this volume. So these are some of the I think the themes, the collective themes that come out from this volume, and we are of course grateful for the contributors to making their individual contributions to what I hope will pave the way to kind of the way we will look forward on the type of visual culture that is produced in Hebrew and in Israel. And with that, I'd like to invite Ido to offer some words about digital content.
Okay, thank you. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here to celebrate the launch of New Directions in Israeli Media. A special thanks goes out to our wonderful contributors for their fascinating chapters and to my fellow editors, Yaron, who also, by the way, supervised my PhD studies, and Eran, who gave me the opportunity to join this project and guided me so generously through the process. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you. So as the youngest among the editors, I've been entrusted with presenting the youngest of all media discussed in the book. It's literally called New Media. I truly believe our book takes an important step in steering scholarly attention toward this field, which, especially in Israel, remains surprisingly under-researched compared to more traditional screen arts. But this book isn't just for scholars. We also invite the general public to enjoy it. Many of the works discussed are popular culture phenomena that spread organically as grassroots content on social media. It's not exactly a beach read, unless your idea of a beach read includes terms like transnational cultural synthesis, but it's probably one of the most refreshing and thoughtful explorations of contemporary media you'll come across. Because this book dives into how Israeli media has evolved in the digital age. Once upon a time, Israeli identity was forged on kibbutzim with plows and ideology, and now it's being debated and defined through TikToks and web series and viral YouTube clips. And somehow this book makes the trajectory feel completely coherent. Which ties to all the chapter in this anthology. What ties them together is a central insight that Israeli media isn't just changing, it's expanding and merging and remixing. It's no longer just about Israeli stories for Israeli audiences. It's about Israeli creators crafting content for a global, online, meme-literate, algorithmically curated world. Through these cultural shifts, the book also traces the major social and political transformation that shaped the 2010s and led us into the unprecedented moment we're living in now. So no, this book won't teach you how to go viral, but it will make you think differently about what it means to create, to remember, and to belong in a world where your screen is often your stage, and sometimes your support group, your synagogue, or even your homeland. Thank you.
Thanks, Ido. Thanks very much. That was very good segue into inviting our contributors to say a few words about their chapters. And I'm just going according to the table of content and asking Shmulik if you want to say a few words on your chapter called Avi Nesher's Present Past Trilogy.
Yes, well, first of all, allow me to congratulate everyone, the editors and my fellow contributors. I haven't time yet to read the entire book, but some of the articles that the chapters that I've already read are just marvelous and thought-provoking, and I really feel honored to be part of it. When Yaron and Eran and Dido asked me to contribute to this magnificent book, the first thing that actually came to my mind was Avi Nesher. And of course, this is a kind of a strange choice because Avi Nesher is no part of new Israeli cinema. And I doubt whether it had something to do with new media. But I thought that the current body of work by Avi Nesher that was made ever since he uh, returned to Israel from the United States in the early 21st century says something very important about Israeli society and about Israeli culture that I find with every new film by Avi Nesher, that I find that he is actually in a kind of in a progressive journey through this track. My chapter actually deals with what I found as kind of Avi Nesher's present past trilogy. I examined three of Avi Nesher's most successful films: Turn Left at the End of the World, The Matchmaker, and Past Life, in which Avi Nesher actually tries to critically examine Israeli society through the perspective of those who were excluded from it, and at the same time trying to say something which I find very important about current Israeli society. I deal with issues that relate to guilt and trauma, and also to Israeli identity. And through these three films, I just try to understand how Avi Nesher was. Most of his films actually go to a certain point in the past of Israel. I mean, only very few of his films, among them Dizing of 99 and The Wonders, actually deal with the present. And I was looking to find out what he's actually trying to say about Israeli society by going back to very important points in time. Either it is the 1968 in Turn Left at the End of the World, or 1977 in Past Lives, or again 1968 in The Matchmaker, in order to find the way he is trying to say some very important things about current Israeli society and its coping with national traumas and national guilt. And just to summarize, I think that it's interesting that's what, at least what I was trying to do, was trying to see what Avi Nesher is, why Avi Nesher is still one of the most important filmmakers in Israeli cinema, even though he's not a new filmmaker, even though he's not a new generation. And in a way, why Avi Nesher's films, when you examine them, at least of course all of them, but I focused on these three films, how Avi Nesher's films actually try and succeed in examining Israeli identity in this current stage.
Thanks, Shmulik. Thanks very much. That was really interesting. Olga, can we have a 5-minute speech from you?
Yeah. Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
All right. So my name is Olga Gashinson, and I contributed a chapter to this fabulous new anthology called Palestinian Ghosts on Israeli Screen. And, you guys talked about kind of new additions or updates, right, to conversation about Israeli film and media. And I think what I add is a representation of Palestinian and specifically the trauma of Nakba by Israeli Jewish filmmakers. So I talk about 4 films. The earliest of them is Forgiveness by Udi Alonis from 2006, so not so new, but the other 3 are much newer. Born in Deir Yassin by Neta Shoshani, 2017. The Dam by Yevgeny Ruman from 2018, and The Dead of Jaffa from Ram Levy from 2019. So all these films envision the trauma of the Palestinian trauma of Nakba in terms of haunting, that is still there in Israeli society, the trauma that has not been resolved, even acknowledged. I have to say that I've written, academic publishing is moving at a very slow pace. So of course I've written this chapter way before October 7. And so unfortunately, since October 7, the ghosts have been multiplying, and probably, years from now, we will still be dealing with films that acknowledge its kind of, an unacknowledged, unatoned for loss. The one final thing that I want to mention is that since I've written this chapter, since I talked about this Palestinian ghosts that haunt Israeli screens, the same trope has also become apparent in some Palestinian-made films. There is a Palestinian short film, The Key. There is also a Palestinian film, A House in Jerusalem, not to be confused with Amos Gitai's film, that both are kind of using this horror idiom of ghosts and haunting to describe the past injustices that have been done to the people. So on that unhappy note, I am going to pass on the virtual microphone. And thank you, congratulations to us. And I'm looking forward to reading the entire volume, as Ido said, on the beach or off the beach.
Okay, Olga, no filmmakers, yes?
Unfortunately, so I invited Ram Levy.
Olga, they're
I see
here.
that he
We were
joined us
able
while
to
you were speaking.
we were
Oh my
able to
God.
get them in. So Ram and Karen are here.
Oh my God, they told me that they were not coming, but oh my God. So that is an absolute gift. So Ram Levy is, of course, a veteran Israeli filmmaker, a giant of cinema, and also in speaking for the underdog. And so his film, The Dead of Jaffa, is an absolute must see for everyone who is interested in the new ways of representing Israeli history. So please, Ram Levy.
I don't think he could be speaking now. He just wanted to congratulate you and be there to listen to this event and to congratulate all of you for the book.
Okay, great. And Karen Levy is, of course, his daughter. So, and his spokeswoman. Thank you so much. Thank you. It really means a lot that he's here. So thank you.
תודה רבה, רם. מודים לך מאוד שהגעת.
Very
All
moving.
right. I don't know if Yael can and wants to speak because I see she's on the, outside. So Yael, is that something you'd like to do?
Actually, yes, I'm outside, and it's a very beautiful place, but not very quiet. So if you hear me well, I will say a few words, but speak very shortly.
We can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to congratulate everybody and to thank the editors for editing this very important volume and for doing a very very deep work, I guess, on each and every one of the articles. And I'll introduce my article shortly. My article deals with the new Palestinian cinema in Israel, new films that were made by Arab Israelis in the last 2 decades before October 7th. And the article introduced the themes and the forms of these films that are quite unique. I mean, they share few characters with the Palestinian cinema, but they turn to new direction. And what is the main theme in those films is a feeling of a dead end in all of the films, and all of those films show young people in an urban society. All of them were take all of them tell stories of young people in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or Haifa, and they all express the feeling of a dead end, of a feeling of not being here, not being there, being an feeling of not belonging to the Israeli society and not belonging to the Arab society in Israel. And all of those films end up with a wish to immigrate abroad, either to Europe or to United States. Some of the films, the characters do immigrate, but in others, they only dream about it. The films that the chapter deals with are Itborerut by Tawfik Abu Wael and Lo Po Lo Kan, saying the titles in Hebrew. I'm not sure the exact names in English.
In Between.
In Between by Maisalan Hamoud, and two works that Said Kashua has written, one for the TV and one is a film. One is the Tasritai, the writer, and the other is Dancing Arabs. And that's it. Thank you for listening. And I apologize for the place I'm in. I was in an event for the hostages in the American embassy. So I'm near the beach here in Tel Aviv. You can taste the wind and the salt here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for making the effort to come. And congratulations on your book of poetry, which was just published very recently, right?
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Eran, will you tell us something about a set within a set?
Yes, thank you so much. So my contribution to the volume deals with the representation of television itself in Israeli cinema. And I bookended with 2 films. The one is from 1969, the movie Siege, which in a way in real time shows the arrival of television sets literally in Israel, because television only started in Israel in the late 1960s. And one of the minor characters in the film starts a business of importing television sets to Israel. So we see it in real time happening. But in that context, television plays a very minor role. It's on the outside. The movie is the center, television is to the side. And I finish it with a much more recent movie, Tel Aviv on Fire, Tel Aviv La'esh, where the entire movie is a television show, or a television show is the center of the film. And in many ways, we see how television consumes cinema and becomes the focus of telling the story. And the argument is that it goes well beyond that, but that the entire film is structured as a soap opera or a television show, whereby the means of telling the story becomes much more informed by television. And I'm just struck now that Ram Levy is with us. I hope that many of the participants or people who are watching this realize what an honor it is to have him here, because Ram Levy, and this is entirely accidental, was really the first person to combine the two elements of cinema and television in Israel. And he has some of the groundbreaking work on films on Israeli television made for Israeli television, and some of the tensions that arose early on really manifested in some of his work in Chebet Chize and Lechem, bread. So in many ways, some of the themes that I try to explore in my chapter, he played out in real time in the oeuvre, in the work of Ram Levy. So this is my contribution to the collection. Thank you, Yaron.
Okay, thank you, Eran. And I think we skip over to Shayna if you wish to say anything about your chapter, Shayna.
Sure. So first of all, I again want to thank the editors. I want to thank all the contributors. I also, of course, want to acknowledge the presence of Ram Levy, who is really it is, as Eran said, an honor to be here. I also just want to say on behalf of sort of the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies, wearing my day job hat, we're really excited that you're all here. And this is really important as what we do as a center. We really are dedicated to arts and culture as part of understanding Israel. So that's my plug for us. So my chapter comes with a long fascination of thinking about Jewishness on Israeli television, but specifically the portrayal of Haredim, of ultra-Orthodox Jews. I'm sure a lot of you know and have noticed that this has become a trend. And what I wanted to do in my article is not look at one or two shows, but to really look at all of them. So first, it just became a real sort of research project, asking everyone I knew, making sure I got all the shows, right? Some are very famous, like Shtisel, some were not. Watching all of them and thinking about what was happening. And what I realized is that these are not really shows about Haredim, which seems like a crazy thing to say. But what I mean is that the Haredi community has its own discourse, right? They have their own internal conversations. These shows are relational, right? Sort of how the Haredi community vis-a-vis the larger Israeli community. And I argue that they fall into a couple of different modes. The first one is this idea of sameness or a likeness. We're all the same. We all have the same struggles, right? Shtisel is a really great example of that. I argue that another one is sort of almost like we're better than you, or we're sort of cooler than you. Shababnikim, or the new black, is one example of that. And then the last one, we're darker than you, looking at really the underbelly of the Haredi world. I would say something like autonomies or even our boys as an example of that sort of, and I sort of just broke these shows into these three categories. And I'm happy to talk about more about that if anyone has any questions. I'll just end with sort of two things that I've been thinking a lot about. One is, of course, what's happened in light of October 7th and the massive changes in Israeli society. One of the things is an increase in tension, right, vis-a-vis Haredim and the rest of, especially Jewish Israeli society, because of the tensions about what's seen as contribution, army service. I'm still figuring out what I think about it, but for those of you who managed to watch the third season of Shababnikim, which just aired, there's a direct discussion of these issues, of what's called sharing the burden, ideas of army and contribution. The other thing, which has happened in the past couple of years, is Haredim on reality television, right? Which is a whole nother genre and a whole nother discussion. There are, of course, Haredi participants on competition shows, but there also have been shows that are completely about Haredim. And I'll just give one example. Vort, which means engagement, or it means literally word in Yiddish, but it refers to an engagement party, was aired this summer. It is basically a Haredi version of The Bachelor, in which Haredim are set up and you sort of watch to see will the dates work or not. It will be interesting to see, has this trend peaked? Will it continue? I don't know, but it's been really interesting to take this project on. It is, I believe, the first attempt to look at all these shows all together. And I thank the editors so much for giving me the chance. Thank you.
Thanks, Shayna. And there are two more contributors to go, myself and Ido, or Ido and myself. And we would be very, very happy to take questions from people who are listening and want to ask any of us anything. But if you have anything in mind, you can write it in. So I think Ido, would you mind saying a few words about your chapter?
Yes. Okay. So my chapter explores the first generation of Israeli content creators who had dreams of making it as professional media stars. It asks whether they managed to carve out a true alternative to traditional media, and it defines the unique characteristics of local millennial culture in the process. And yes, I will use this opportunity to say that it also serves as a teaser for my upcoming monograph, Independent Content Creators Online, Transmedia Crossovers and Millennial Culture in Israel, out next month. But I think that the key element to define or to decipher the characteristics of the Israeli Gen Y or millennials is through the unique temporality which is revealed in their digital works. And well, what I find there is a crisis of time, of the linear advance of time, which connects us, by the way, both to major theories by contemporary historians and other chapters in this book, even though some of the connections were very surprising for us as editors throughout the work when reading the materials by the other writers. So in generally, I'm speaking about what is referred to sometimes as presentism or the end of history or the end of the grand narratives. Since the 90s, after the collapse of the Berlin Wall and all the changes that followed, there is a crisis of the way that a lot of us who think about time, historians, artists, just regular people who experience it, the feeling is that there has been so much tension between the past and the future that once held an optimistic promise, and the past that we used to rely on in order to get advices from the elderly or the more experienced in order to know how to conduct our lives. Both of these has been stretched to a point of breaking. We can no longer, well, I'm speaking in generalizations, but we can no longer rely on the past to predict our future, and the advancement toward the future does not necessarily promise a better condition. And so what happens is that we are stuck in eternal present. And this crisis of temporality, of course, is connected to what Shmulik speaks about in Avi Nesher's films, what Olga says about the past that keeps hunting us in the present, Raz Yosef's chapter about queer temporality, and so on. Yes, this is my chapter.
Okay, thanks, Ido. And I will end with very few words about my contribution to this volume, which touches very directly, precisely at the convergence that I referenced in the beginning, because the chapter looks at the attempt of a show that started online Gittit Fisher's humorous show that started online, which was then tried to be adapted to television and broadcast on television and didn't really succeed online, and then was abandoned and went back online, chopped up, and circulated on the web. So the interesting thing about this show that shows some of the conversions we spoke about and the focus of the volume is that how a creative idea that starts online is adapted to more traditional platforms such as television, but is not really suited for it for various reasons, and then is dropped and goes back online where it is sort of cannibalized, taken apart, and circulates on the web in yet a sort of third iteration of its creative life. So this is really something very, very interesting, and that goes very, very directly into one of the central themes of the anthology, which is really about this convergence. And I think this sort of round that we've done right now, hearing from the present contributors, is kind of the end of the official part of this launch, and we can first of all invite, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ram Levi wants to say a few things. And after that, we can continue the discussion either between us with questions from us to ourselves, or we'd be very, very happy to receive questions from people listening. So please, Ram.
Thank you very much for letting me say a few things. I'm so happy that information of the kind you are spreading in the United States is so good and so important for us, because we are living away from the center of the cinema world, and we are told few things which are far away from the reality, but still I believe that it's very important that more information about how Israeli cinema looks. It's a good idea to deal with it, but it's only very small part of what we can do and contribute to the Israeli countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ram. If anybody has questions to Ram and they want to do this, perhaps if it's more comfortable in Hebrew, we can do this in Hebrew and then,
Okay.
translate.
Yaron, we did get a question in.
Uh-huh.
I'll ask it because I think everyone will have something to say about it. Because I don't think it's visible to everyone. So some of this we spoke about again, but I think it's worth reiterating, is sort of compared to the previous volume, what are the trends you're observing? Has Israeli cinema and television become more or less critical? And then finally, looking ahead, what do you think will be the impact on visual culture in Israel of October 7th? So obviously all big questions. I don't know, Yaron, if you want to start, if anyone of the panelists want to jump in, but maybe we can start. I was to say, Olga looks like she has things to say, so maybe we'll start with her, and then we can all weigh in.
Olga, please.
So just a few comments. So so I've been working the last few years on the new Israeli horror films. I have a book literally called New Israeli Horror, a title that, after October 7 really has a new meaning. In the course of this research, I came in touch with a bunch of, kind of young filmmakers and filmmakers to be, including this phenomenal young guy, Shayna Weiss, who is himself a survivor of October 7 and a cinephile. So following October 7, as he was like recovering from the terrible trauma, he crafted this kind of manifesto, a call to filmmakers to reflect the experience, to Israeli filmmakers to reflect on October 7 in their future films. And the interesting thing that came out of this manifesto is that he, together with some other young filmmakers and film critics, created this new organizations called the Intangible Cinema plural. And so they are trying to kind of promote that representation. And one of the things that Shani Kiniso calls for, and that's particularly striking to me as Israeli horror scholar, is that he calls for production of more horror films. And he thinks that the trauma and the events of October 7 are particularly well suited for the idiom of horror films. Because as you probably know, horror films can convey the kind of repressed traumas, the kind of things in the society that are at the heart of its anxieties and concerns. And so that's something, now I don't know if Shani Kiniso's call will be answered, right? That is for us to remain, remains to be seen. But I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention and to see what happens, right? So this is my take on this. So Shani Kiniso, the Intangible Cinema Project.
Does anyone, yeah, Eran?
So a few thoughts about this excellent question. So picking back on Olga's book on horror films, I think one of the big developments that happened globally to cinema over the past 15 years is the decline of grand cinema and the emergence of genre films as the dominant feature of films everywhere on the globe, from Korea to the United States. And to some degree, we saw some developments in Israel that parallel those developments, the move from the grand national cinema to more genre-based films. So this is one kind of development that happened. But to give a broader question, when the first volume was done in 2011, it was the age of the great triumph of Israeli cinema on the international scene. In the previous decade, Israeli films featured so prominently in the major international competitions and in festivals around the world, and there was a sense of a victory of Israeli cinema. Since then, when we conceived of this volume, it seemed that Israeli television was following the same path, and the international streaming platforms really allowed Israeli creators to reach audiences that were unimaginable before those possibilities appeared. But in light of October 7th, I'm not sure that this is, at least in the immediate future, at all possible for Israeli visual media to achieve this reach on the international scene. And I'm sure that many of you have saw the headlines from yesterday about the Doku Aviv, the important festival that takes place in Israel, and how many international creators outright rejected the opportunity to participate or simply ignored the invitation to participate. And I'm not sure that there's great appetite among streaming services or other international distributors to deal right now with products that emanate from Israel. So I'm sure that this will present incredible challenges moving forward for Israeli visual media to reach a broader audience.
In addition to that, I'm assuming, Iran, that the mood amongst filmmakers in Israel is also not going to be particularly accommodating of these kinds of the continuation of that kind of onslaught of shows that we have seen in the past, and in a again sorry attempt to reply to part of this question is perhaps an intensification of the so-called Holocaust discourse in Israel with additional layer of sense of victimization that will emerge from October 7th. But this, of course, is very difficult to tell. And I'm wondering if anybody else wants to.
Yes.
I have a couple.
Sorry.
No, you don't go first. I'll go after you.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to add two points to the discussion. First, Moti questions asks about the impact that October 7th might have on visual culture in Israel. So, first of all, I want to remind that the events of the terror attack on October 7th well, I have read that some people call it the most documented terror attack ever. Now, I don't know if ever, but there's no doubt that the amount of footage of and documentation of the events of this day is immense. The Hamas terrorists who invaded Israel were wearing body cams. The young people who in the Nova Music Festival were documenting themselves with their cell phones um, throughout the whole stages of the party, the invasion, the fleeing, sometimes even the tragic results of the violence. And there's also been a lot of discussion about these images. First of all, they're spread through alternative media channels and not through legacy media, through social networks, through apps like Telegram. And also then there has been the official film edited from this footage by the Israeli government that was sometimes used for diplomatic events and screenings to all sorts of high-rank figures around the world, which also raises a lot of questions. So this is for actual real footage, what we can associate more with documentary. Regarding fiction, and there is so the war between Israel and Gaza is still going on. There are still dozens of hostages in Gaza as we speak. And yet we already saw more films about this and TV specials about the subject than I can count on both hands through this very short period of time. And we can wonder about the perspective needed in order to deal with this historic event. You can already find award-winning documentaries in festivals, feature films that either being completed or we know that are being produced in different stages of production currently. Some of them already have distribution deals abroad. So we will see a lot of media representation, but it raises a whole bunch of questions that I'm sure will fill many books in the future.
So I wanted to second Ido, right? The question of the footage, the ethical questions, the moral questions, how the state of Israel has used this footage in its own diplomatic efforts are huge, huge things that will take years to figure out. I just want to add that two things. One is, of course, just the media environment in Israel, concerns about freedom of speech, what is shown, what is not being shown. You know, there are dozens of examples, whether it's, discussions over No Other Land or rescheduling certain documentaries. That's definitely that's the environment that a lot of filmmakers find themselves in. It's also done interesting things to just the schedules. For example, there are a lot of shows that were delayed. A show that's currently airing now, Hametzach, right? The Front, about the Yom Kippur War, was rescheduled twice. I expect there will be more interest in the Yom Kippur War for all obvious reasons. And then the last thing I want to say is I'll make my plug for reality television again because of the speed at which reality television moves. there is constant discussion of October 7th on reality television. Of course, Eurovision, which is this week, features a Nova survivor. It is on the cooking shows. It is on the singing show. It is on everything. It is on everything. And it's really interesting to see how that happens. And I expect we'll see more sort of artistic, if you could call it, representation as time goes on. What shape that will take, I don't know, but it will be interesting to see. I believe Olga has one more thing she wants to add.
Well, also, what you guys were saying, especially what Ido was saying, reminded me to plug in one of the most, I think, important films that came out recently about the aftermath of October 7 in Israel. It's a new film by Danny Rosenberg called Of Dogs and Men, Al Klavim Anashim, I think it's called. It just got a new prize, main prize at the Berlin Brandenburg Jewish Film Festival, and it's making rounds. And it was filmed already in November 2023. Actual on the actual kibbutzim where the terrorist act took place, and they were and Rosenberg was filming it before he had any funds, before he had any permissions. It's more or less guerrilla filming, and it provides a remarkable view of the events from predominantly Israeli, but also in some ways Palestinian perspective. And it really brings together everything that we have talked about. I think this is one of the kind of important films that's kind of docu-fiction that came out of this terrible time.
And I would like to add, just Shayna mentioned the very relevant topic of the Yom Kippur War and the major trauma in Israeli society following it. And in the book, there is a chapter by Oded about a TV series called Shat Ne'ilah, Valley of Tears, which is about this issue, which becomes super relevant again in these times.
And I'll just add, oh, sorry, no, Shmulik, go ahead. You haven't had a chance.
Yes, I just wanted to add a few things because some of the things that I want to say were already mentioned. But first of all, Avi Nesher himself is now working on a film about October 7th. So probably in the next volume. But there is another thing that we should bear in mind when we are asking what kind of films will be made. We should bear in mind that right now it's very difficult to make Israeli films, not only because foreign funds and foreign producers do not want actually to collaborate with Israeli funds and to collaborate with Israeli producers. Some of them say it very bluntly, and others are just going around and saying, well, it might not be the right time. But there is also what Miki Zohar, our minister, our distinguished minister of culture, that actually is now trying to or actually change the way that films are going to be graded within the Israeli film funds, so that critical films, so that films that are not meant for public entertainment are actually not going to be made, or will find it very difficult to be made. And I'm sure this has a lot to do with October 7th, because many filmmakers will actually want to deal with what has happened. And I think that when you are dealing with what has happened, you are actually dealing with other questions and with other issues that might not be that pleasant for the Israeli officials to deal with. So I think this is a kind of thing that we should bear in mind. So at least as I see it, I'm rather optimistic in my nature, but there is a reason to worry about the future of Israeli cinema. Mind you that the films that we are seeing now are films that were already made 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm not that certain how many films we are going to see in the next few years, because what is happening now will affect the films that are not being made now and will not be shown in the future. And I'm very happy that Ram is here, because Ram, for me, is one of the beacons of political cinema, and I think that making, for example, his film Dead of Jaffa, again, is one of these films that could not have been made in the present climate in Israel.
So this comes up, another question came in, which is related, which is, of course, there's huge amounts of footage from Gaza, right? Parallel in many ways, or, along the material from October 7th. Do you think, first of all, has any of this made its way into Israeli film or television? Do you think it has any chance, right? That question is for everyone. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that I can think of, which doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But given that, and I'll just say this, given that it's not broadcast really on the news in Israel, other than the most sort of more radical filmmakers, I don't see a way for it getting in the current political climate. Others may feel differently. That's just my sort of quick answer.
I have an attempt to reply this from a Israeli historical perspective, and that is, given the Jewish penchant of focusing on unpleasantries or unpleasant things that happen to people, to the nation, to the people. There is a high chance that all of this footage that you mentioned in the material will, in fact, will find its way to be expressed somehow creatively. And again, from the reason I mentioned Zionism and historiography at the beginning of my reply is that whereas in the past Israeli cinema was focused on sort of the development of the life of the nation on sort of its ancestral soil and the Zionist story, and avoided, by and large, national traumas. Yes, they found individual expression, and Avi Nesher again is a good example, his films, but I think that there might be a change, an interesting change, where this sort of negation of diaspora that was part of Zionism, not really focusing on horrific things that happen to the people, are perhaps will undergo a change with this thing, and cinema, television, or creators will focus on this and go in a different direction that is more so-called diasporic. But again, I may be too much tied to the past in this, but I'm thinking of Alan Mintz's famous book, Churban, which looks at Jewish reactions to catastrophes throughout history as they're expressed creatively, and that's what makes me think about it.
There was another question that came in from Professor Sobel, and this is geared at the editors, about a choice to focus specifically on Israeli cinema without necessarily a comparative lens. So, like, what were you thinking when you conceived of the project? Maybe can think about this. What are the boundaries of Israeli cinema, and sort of how you all think about that?
So I think our book complicates the definitions of any national cinema, really, as we mentioned, more in the context of television. But over the 2010s, there has been a huge leap in globalization, specifically in the screen arts. And even though some chapters do include naturally comparative angle, but in general, the theme of the book, of the converging cultural field that remains fluid and changing and reshaping to this day, has been one of the core issues of this volume.
Eran, did
I
you
would
want to
just
say?
say that in the 1990s, when film scholars talked about national cinemas as opposed to cinema, what they meant is that national cinema was vis-a-vis Hollywood or contra Hollywood or against Hollywood. This was what national cinema was. And in this regard, Israeli cinema was Israeli cinema. It was not Hollywood. It was made in Israel with the specific conditions of producing and financing and filming and telling a certain story. So what, among other things, happened to Israeli media, especially television in the 21st century, is that it has become more Hollywood or much more integrated to the global visual industry. And when you produce on the web, of course, you are, by the very nature of algorithms and the way you manufacture things, you are integrated into the global community. So these elements in a way play out in this collection, indicating that the more kind of international elements happen maybe less so in cinema and more in other forms of contemporary visual media.
Well, I think this is a very nice moment, almost on the hour, considering that we began a little bit later, to thank everyone who came here and to conclude this launch, and thank the contributors, thanks the people who signed in and tuned in, and a big thank you to Shayna, who was very generous with with what she could, with the Akhsania venue.
Hospitality, yeah.
And hospitality. And again, thank you very much for Ram Levi for coming tonight, and Karin, and
Buy the book.
I'm sorry.
Oh, buy the book.
And yeah, buy the book, right?
One more
Thank you
time.
all. Thank you all to everyone. Really appreciated all of you for coming.